What's up guys, TechLab here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a case that looks very similar to the Fractal Torrent, except it most definitely isn't one. So for those of you that haven't worked it out yet, this case is actually not from Fractal, and it most definitely isn't a Fractal Torrent, but it does share a similar design front. It is actually from a company called HellCracks here in the UK. Of course, as you can see from the front, it is inspired by something like the Fractal Torrent. So for those of you that can't afford the extortionate price of a Fractal Torrent, maybe this case is for you. The exact model number of this is the HCS195V2. It is a version 2 of a different type of case, and it will actually cost you around £42. So that's not actually that bad. It's pretty budget in price, and to be honest, it is pretty budget when it comes to the build. As we can see from the front, we have a very Fractal Torrent type of design. We've got the fins that go up the front, up to the side, and then we have this little shoot off into the corner. That is very similar to the Fractal Torrent, and it is a full mesh front. There is a mesh panel behind this, and it's extremely easy to remove. All we have to do is simply just click it off from the bottom and then just pull it forward. And as we can see on the rear, we have this kind of meshing in here, which is an anti-dust filter really, but that's going to provide lots and lots of airflow into your system, so that's actually pretty cool. The case does come with 3 RGB fans, and they are a little bit unique to this company because they do run from a primary and secondary base system, so you can actually pigtail each fan together. They plug in via SATA, and then you can actually just control them with the RGB controller, which has a button on the top of the case. When I say that the case is a budget case, you can actually tell this throughout the design of it. The chassis itself is not the greatest. If we actually turn it around here and take a look at the glass, to remove the glass we need to actually remove these little corner pegs. Now that is a clear sign of a budget case. They're not even really rubber, they're actually just this plastic with a little screw top, but there's one in each corner of the side panel. But the side panel is tempered glass. It's reasonably thick, so you're not exactly going to break it. Inside the case, we've got a pretty standard setup here. It is an ATX case, so you can fit either an ATX board, a full ATX board, a micro ATX board, or a mini ATX board. They will all fit fine, but you can't fit like an eATX because we actually have a panel at the front stopping it there. It is built with a basement here for 2 placements for fans on the bottom. They're 120mm fans, or you can actually mount some kind of graphics card kind of mount in there. They didn't actually come with one, or not one that I could find, but there's definitely some screw holes there for that kind of thing. The rear is pretty simple. We've got a basic layout here. We've got an IO place there, a place for a 120mm fan at the top there, a full row of PCI expansion cards, and obviously your power supply goes at the bottom there. To remove the other side off this, we just need to remove these thumb screws. It's nice that they do come with thumb screws. These ones are a bit more of a rubbery plastic, so they're a little bit nicer to take off. And then the side should just slide straight off. With the side panel taken off, we can see that it is a very flimsy steel. It's very flexible. There's nothing really in there keeping it together. There's no soundproofing in this. There's no little plungers to kind of put stuff on, but do you expect that for the kind of price these cases are? Probably not. I mean, if you are going to actually invest in something like the Fractal Torrent, you're going to expect those kind of things, but for the price of this case, you probably wouldn't. In the back, we do actually have a pretty standard layout here. We've got a plate where obviously your motherboard will mount to, and then we have a great big hole here so we can access the back of your CPU socket. Now that's actually fantastic because that means it's going to be really simple to change coolers in this case. There's nothing going to get in the way, which is pretty nice to see. We have a reasonably big basement in the bottom here, which is enough space for a pretty decent sized power supply. A little caddy for either a couple of hard drives, 3.5 hard drives, or an SSD, which can actually be moved. You can actually just take this caddy out and slide it across a little bit just to give yourself a little bit more space for your power supply there. The power supply does feed from underneath, and it does come with its own dust filter. It is just a very basic little plate that's held in with some little clips, but at least it's got one. And then we come to the cable management kind of space. Now there isn't much space in this at all. There is literally about a 10mm gap up and down the side of the cases. It's just enough maybe just to get your EPS cable in, but apart from that there isn't much space. Now there are tie-offs all the way around, but like I say, if you've got reasonably thick cables, I don't think you're really going to get away with using them. You're going to have to flatten everything quite down, but it does come with a little hole to take your EPS cable through. We have actually looked at some budget cases in the past that don't even have that, so having that is a pretty good feature. It's something that you definitely need if you want to keep the inside tidy. It does though have a bit of a cutout in the front here, which actually gives you a bit of depth for cable management. It means that all these cables that come down can actually be tucked away, and particularly your big thick 24 pin one can go up through the side, and it can actually go into this front of the case through these little slots here. There are no rubber grommets on these slots, so again that's another sign of a budget case, but that's fine for the price. and it does mean that you are going to get reasonably decent cable management throughout. Now we do have a big bunch of cables in here, from your power switch to your front audio to your USB and stuff like that. And in this case, we actually have a bit of an array on top. If we just take a look at the top here, we can see that as part of the I/O, we have a power switch, we have a reset switch, we have a USB 2, a microphone in jack, we have a headphone out jack, we have another USB 2, and then we have a USB 3. So there is no USB-C on this case. You're going to have to rely on the one on your motherboard or an expansion card if that's how you use it. And then of course we have an LED button. Now that LED button should cycle the fans through different kind of colors, or at least we're hoping so. We're going to test that out anyway, but that's actually what the I/O looks like. And when you look at the top as well, we do have more placements for more cooling, as well as a nice little magnetic dust filter on top. When it comes to cooling solutions, this case does actually have quite a lot in it. We do have the rear 120mm fan placement, which we can put something in there to exhaust with. On the top, we have enough space for up to two 120mm fans, or our 240mm radiator, or two 140mm fans, so we can get plenty of exhaust on this system. And then in the front, we have, of course, a place for three 120mm fans, which it comes pre-installed with. Now, unfortunately, there is no space in the front to actually put any kind of 140mm fans. You are restricted to just 120s, but that does mean at least you can get a full system of 120s in there. So it's going to actually provide a pretty decent airflow. Now, just like the rear, we do have lots of mounting points inside of the case as well. If we actually take a look into here, we do have this little sticking out bit, which we looked at when we looked at the back. This is where your cables are going to come through. And then you have two placements here and here for your 2.5-inch SSD drives. That is if you want to mount them on the inside. And unlike some cases that we've actually used, there is plenty of space down the side of the fans to get them drives in. You also get two little holes at the bottom here for cable management to come through. So that's for your USB 2s or your front audio header. So all in all, the case actually comes with everything that you need. There isn't nothing missing from this case. It just is a little bit cheap on the build quality. As you can see, the case is extremely light, and that is with three fans in it. You could throw this around. What actually really does add the weight to this case is, of course, the glass panel, and that is probably the most heaviest piece of the whole thing. So that is literally the case all the way around. That's pretty much all the features you get. There's nothing fancy on this case, there's nothing extreme. It is pretty much all you need to just get a system running. But what we'll do is we'll take a look at these fans and we'll see how they actually work. So we've unpinned all the cables and we're just going to chuck them ones over there. They are for the front I/O. We'll see if we can get them to stay out of the way. And then we can see what we've got here. This cable here is actually a little 2-pin kind of connection that goes from the LED button all the way down and plugs into a little block. Now that does say reset switch on it, but effectively that just goes to one of the fans. And that's because one of the fans, which in this case is actually the bottom fan, is the primary fan. That one's the one that actually controls the lighting through the others. And then using these little pigtail connections, which are pretty proprietary kind of connections, they all link together. It does mean that you've got to kind of hide these wires, so I would actually advise you taking them all apart, taking them off and actually feeding them through properly, and then connecting them all up together at the back. And then of course we need some way of powering them, and to do that we use this. This is the SATA connection. So I'll grab a quick power supply and then we'll see what these fans actually look like when they're turned on. Now with our jerry-rigged power supply all connected, all we need to do is switch it on and the fans should start spinning. As we can see, they are starting to spin and they're starting to actually have some colour. But if we click the LED button, they should change different formats. We start going through different colours. Eventually we should get back round to rainbow, I hope. And there we are, we've gone back to rainbow. As we can tell, the fans themselves are also controlled in terms of speed by the power supply. And to be honest, they're not producing that much air. There's a little bit going into the system. It's enough to keep the system cool, but you may want to actually replace these anyway with something that can be motherboard controlled. I can't actually see if there is a mechanism or a way of controlling them on the motherboard, particularly when it comes to speed. The RGB seems to be able to actually plug into something else, but not the speed itself. And as you can tell, there is also something wrong with this top fan here. It's not spinning as fast as the others. That might be because of some kind of connection issue, or maybe it is a faulty fan. I'm not quite sure, but generally this is what you're going to get out of the box. You will get these three fans. It's enough to produce enough air to keep the system reasonably cool, but you can always upgrade or add to, because you can actually plug additional fans onto them and you can pretty much load the case all the way up. So that actually works. The LED button works as well. You can also jerry-rig this LED button using the connection to a different type of hub. So if you don't like the one that's actually built into the system, or if you want to replace it with different fans that require a hub, you can actually just hook up the LED button to that, and that will then actually get to control all of it. So we've taken a look at all the case. It's pretty much a standard thing. There's nothing really abnormal about it. It's got everything that you kind of need, including pre-installed fans. So all we want to do now is actually see how well you can actually build into it. So we'll drop a quick build into this. We'll put the front back on and we'll see what it looks like once them lights and everything shine through. Does it really give you the Fractal Torrent kind of feel or not? I'm not quite sure yet. I have my doubts, but we'll build it and we'll come back. Okay, so the build is actually done, and to be honest, everything went perfectly fine. I didn't have a single issue with building in this case, and even though I said before that it didn't look like there was that much room for cable management, it was actually all in the exact place that I needed it to be, so we actually did a pretty clean job on the back as well. As you can see, everything looks pretty filled out. This is a pretty standard build here. We have an ATX motherboard. It is an AM4 platform with a Ryzen processor and a Gigabyte RX 5700 XT. It's not the biggest graphics card in the world, and we do have a reasonable gap from the front to the graphics card, but it fills the case out nicely, and I'm actually really impressed with the way this went. This case is a budget case, but it just didn't feel like that when you were building into it. Everything seemed to have been put in the right place as if it had a purpose, which is great because there's nothing worse than having a case where nothing actually fits or reaches, and we had no issues with any of the cables fitting anywhere. But how well does this case look when we actually turn it on, particularly with those RGB fans in the front? Well, to find out, we need to plug it in and we need to turn it on. Everything is now plugged in, so all we need to do is hit that switch and see if it turns on. And there we go, we've got power. Everything is lighting up. We've got the RGB fans here. If we just turn the case around, you'll be able to see the RGB of the system. There will be a glass panel here, obviously. But everything seems to work perfectly fine. There is actually quite a bit of air coming through the front of them fans there. I don't know if I would actually keep these fans or not, or whether replace them, but I would definitely, if I keep them, I would get another one for the back just so it matched. I actually think the front looks pretty good on this. It does look a little bit like the Fractal Torrent, you know, with the design here and the way that the light actually shines off different things. I think this could look a pretty decent system on your desk. But let me know in the comments below, would you consider buying a case like this with a Fractal Torrent design front? It does look pretty smart, I will admit, and for the price of this you can't really go wrong, particularly for those who are on a very tight budget. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and if you want to see some more weird cases coming along, because I'm pretty sure we'll get some more in soon. We do like looking at the weird stuff, but I'm sure as always we will catch you in the next one.